Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military of a Summary channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction where the Russians continue their offensive operation. During the previous 24 hours, during the previous night between the 21st and the 22nd of September of 2025, lots of explosions were recorded on the territory of the city of Zaporizhzhia. 5 strikes in Zaporizhzhia. Industrial and infrastructure facilities of the Ukraine armed forces were attacked. So now it's clear that Ukrainians continue redeploying their forces and their units in the direction of the line of combat contact in the vicinity of the city by the name of Gulay Polye through the city of Zaporizhzhia. So that is why the Russians are bombing and attacking this territory with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to bring additional forces in the area of the Poltavka and Uspianovka fortified area, where the armed forces of the Russian Federation continue their offensive. According to information we have, during the previous 12 hours, the Russians once again managed to improve their positions. This is the area of responsibilities of the 5th Army, and as we understand, this 5th Army is trying to get as close as possible to the settlements of Uspianka, Novopavlivka, Novopavlivka, and basically to attack the territory between these two fortified areas. So now we understand that the Russians most likely are tasked to capture the village of Poltavka in coming days. At the same time, we start receiving more and more updates of how Ukrainians were redeploying additional forces to the line of combat contact, and this is the reason why the Russians of 29th and 36th armies were stopped or were slowed down. So now Ukrainians are trying to concentrate additional forces in this area, probably with the purpose either to counterattack Russians or to at least stabilize the situation and not to allow the Russians to move further in the northwestern direction. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Novopavlivka direction. During the previous week, we received lots of updates from this area. The most important were that the Russians crossed the river of Volcha and began assault operation on the settlement on Ivanovka, and as a result of clashes during the previous days, the Russians captured the southeastern part of the settlement. Obviously, this Ivanovka offensive operation is the part of bigger offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Novopoltavka. The Russians first need to secure this area before moving further in the northeastern direction. As for the previous 12 hours, the pro-Russian resources published this video. Here we can see how Russians destroyed another bridge in the settlement of Novopavlivka that connected the western and the eastern banks of the river, and as a result of this attack the bridge was destroyed. Obviously this bridge will not lead to complete collapse of Ukrainian logistic, but this is once again a part of probably special operation with the purpose to intensify the global offensive operation in the direction of the settlement. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians improved their positions around the settlement of Muravka. The Russians secured completely the territory along the river of Salona. It seems that the Russians are preparing themselves before crossing the river itself, and then the Russians will continue offensive operation further in the southwestern direction with the purpose to attack the settlement of Novopavlivka as well. So we see that the Russians are tasked, and this is very serious, to continue offensive operation in this area in the Novopavlivka direction. If Russians can take the village of Novopavlivka under complete control and to force Ukrainians to fall back, then from these positions the Russians will be able to attack in any direction. In the direction of the settlement of Mizheva, which is located along the railways, the Russians can attack in the western direction towards Prasiana, Malomikhailovka, Pokrovsk, and Velika Mikhailovka from the north as well. So the Zaporizhzhia offensive operation is something very dangerous for the armed forces of Ukraine. We see that there are several places where the situation has already become critical for Ukrainians, and we see that Ukrainians still haven't managed to stabilize the situation. Now let's move to the city of Pokrovsk and to the Pokrovsk agglomeration. During the previous 12 hours we got 2 important videos. This is the first one, and this video took place in the most northern part of the settlement of Mirnograd, and here we can see how Russians were bombing positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in the northern part of the settlement. This video confirms that this area is in the complete Ukrainian control. At the same time, a bit further in the eastern direction we have another video, this time made from the area of Mirnogradskaya mine. Here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking and were bombing positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And this video confirms that this facility is under complete control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So this is the situation. These two videos gave us additional understanding of the line of combat contact in this area. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Siversk-Liman direction. During the previous 24 hours, 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. According to neutral mappers, the Russians improved their positions just a bit along the river of Seversky Donetsk. Now the Russians are trying to move along this huge forest in the southern direction towards the bridge between the settlement of Dronovka and Yampol, with the purpose most likely to attack the settlement of Dronovka from behind. So we see that the Russians are ready to begin their offensive operation with the crossing of the river of Seversky Donetsk. And another important update is coming from the Rubtsy direction. The Rubtsy direction is the direction when Russians will try to attack in the area of the settlement by the name of Rubtsy. So this is the village. And during the previous 12 hours, several mappers reported that the Russians continued their offensive operation on the western bank of the river of Nitrius, and it seems that the Russians are not planning to stop. During the previous week, we got lots of reports that 1st Sabotage and Reconnaissance Group of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation got the village of Kharovy Yar, and several units of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation were discovered in the area of the villages of Alexandriivka and Krymki, which means that most likely before moving further in the direction of the city of Liman, the Russians may try to attack in the western direction from the village of Nitrius until they get the river Voskol. The Ukrainian sources and pro-Russian resources reported that the Armed Forces of Ukraine has deployed units of the 8th Special Operations Regiment to the Rubtsovsk area to build up resistance in the Sredny and Shandrigolova areas. This information is confirmed by residents of the village of Voskol, who say well-equipped militants, 3 to 5 strong, have been stationed in private homes. So the Russians are trying to tell us that the Ukrainians realized that the situation is becoming very critical in this area, and they began bringing additional forces in this area with the purpose not to allow the Russians to get the river Voskol. So we believe that the Russians may try to move further in the western direction with the purpose to capture villages of Novoselovka, Yarova, Alexandriivka, Yatskivka, Rubtsy, Lazova, Karpovka, Kharovy Yar, and to connect this bridgehead with Russian positions in the area of the village of Glushenkova. If Russians can take this territory under complete control, this will lead to complete collapse of Ukrainian defense, because from this moment Ukrainians would be forced to concentrate additional forces in Izyum and Oskol areas with the purpose not to allow the Russians to move further. Furthermore, the Barovo foothold would be cut from supply and support, and Russians will be able to intensify their offensive operation in this direction. Ukrainians would be forced at the end to fall back from this area as well, and Ukrainians all in all would be forced to stretch their units from the settlement of Liman to the city of Barovo, and this is a very huge distance, and most likely Ukrainians will not have enough of forces to control every single square kilometer in this area. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the northeastern part of Kharkiv region. The Russians continue their offensive operation in the area of the city of Volchansk. During the previous 12 hours, pro-Russian resources adjusted their maps, showing additional progress on the ground. So according to these mappers, the Russians are moving in the direction of the settlement of Sinelnikova, and during the previous days, the Russians improved their position significantly. When summarizing everything that was published by pro-Russian resources, this is approximately the territory that is already under complete control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. First of all, and one of the most important, that one of the supply lines was cut by the Russians, the road that goes from the city of Volchansk towards the city of Kharkiv. This road was cut. Ukrainians currently suffer huge problems with logistics. We said that the Russians most likely will continue offensive operation further until they establish physical control over T-2104 road. If Russians can do this as well, this will lead to complete collapse of Ukrainian logistics in the entire city of Volchansk. The Ukrainians would be forced to begin supporting their forces along T-2104 road through the settlement of Bily Kolodys, but this logistic is too big, and this will increase the the expenses. This will increase the Ukrainian losses, and obviously this will lead at the end to complete collapse of defense and retreat of the armed forces of Ukraine from this area. We see that the Russians continue their Kharkiv offensive operation, and we see that Ukrainians still haven't redeployed here additional forces for stabilization. Most likely, in the end, Ukrainians will face the same problems in the Kharkiv direction as they face right now in the Zaporizhzhia area. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.